Hello and welcome to today's Choice EHR training. Today you have joined the provider medication training. Our focus today is going to be talking about writing new prescriptions, printing prescriptions, sending them electronically, and then we're going to talk about a couple of additional tips and tricks like copying or refilling the medication, as well as utilizing a favorites list. So let's go ahead and get started. Beginning here in the summary screen of the EMR, we are going to navigate into our list of chart tabs to find the medication chart tab. Now, if you haven't already played around or kind of watched or reviewed any additional trainings at this point, there are other areas to view your current medications, one of which is going to be on the far right-hand side of the screen underneath the patient AMP. The M is going to represent your current medications, and all of those details are going to be displayed here. Now, as we hop into the medication chart tab, I want to take a moment to describe really the two sections of this screen. The top section here is going to display our drug search. This allows us to search for any drug that we could potentially think of. So by clicking on that drug search, we get this nice search bar where we can then search for a series of drugs based on different search criteria that we type in. The results of this search are going to show us everything from the generic drug name all the way down to the dispense of the actual drug and the dosage of that information. Moving into the bottom half of the screen, we're going to move into what we call the RX pad. Now, this is made to look like an actual prescription pad, and all of these individual details on this RX pad are actually interactive. You can click inside of them to see additional details or fill out additional pieces of information in order to complete a prescription. Now let's go ahead and start with writing a prescription. This is basically simplified into 4 very quick steps. The first step is going to be searching for your drug. So today we are going to search for our amoxicillin 250 milligram capsule. By selecting that medication, it now is applied to the RX pad down at the bottom area of the screen. We're now going to move into step 2. Step 2 is moving into the RX pad and deciding what are we going to do with this prescription. Are we going to write a new prescription for the patient, or are we going to document a patient-reported medication? Now, in today's example, we're going to write a new prescription, and we're going to tell the system that we're doing that by ensuring that the upper left-hand corner says prescribe. If for whatever reason, maybe my nurse forgot to document that the patient was taking a med and we wanted to document a patient-reported medication, we can click where it says prescribe and change that to report so that the medication is saved correctly in the system. Now, moving into step 3, which is going to be filling out the RX pad. We can actually, like I mentioned, go into each of these different areas to complete all of the details. So first, we're going to click into the SIG field to select our SIG quantity. So we'll say this patient is taking 1 capsule orally every day. We can use the freeform box if we needed additional patient instructions, or this works great if you're trying to titrate a medication. There is also this opportunity to mark this SIG as freeform text only, and sometimes that is a little bit easier for the pharmacist to read. So if you're looking for some more space to type in some patient instructions, this is a great option to do so. We're going to move down into our dispense quantity. So how many is the patient receiving in the bottle? So say they're receiving a 30-day supply. And at this time, if we want to put in any refills, maybe we say this patient can receive 3 refills, and we want to mark the effective date as starting today. You can put in some additional details like a void date or dispense as written or something like that if needed. And then at the very bottom of the screen, if there are any additional notes or comments to send to the pharmacy or pharmacist, those can be entered here, as well as any internal comments that need to be associated with this prescription. So say, for example, the patient is going to try this for the first 2 weeks, call us with any questions. We can mark that information and that will stay inside of the choice database. Once we've filled out all of the drug specifications, we're going to move into the pharmacy section. Now, our nurse has already gone in and she has set up the patient's pharmacy for us, so we can see that information displayed here. If at whatever point you need to change this pharmacy, simply select the pharmacy name, which is going to bring up a couple of different options for a pharmacy recently used list or potentially a favorites list. So recently used will show us any pharmacies that have been previously used for this patient. The zip code search will show us any pharmacies that are close to the patient based on that patient's zip code inside of their demographic setup. And the office favorites will show us any pharmacies that have been identified by the practice as an office favorite. Now, by using this list, if we still can't find what we're looking for, we're going to navigate into the lower left-hand corner and select the search button. That allows us to search for additional pharmacies across the country and potentially outside of our state. So if I'm looking for a pharmacy, potentially a CVS in maybe Hollywood, we can search for that information by typing in those keywords and then double clicking on that actual pharmacy that we want to add to the RX pad. Now in this case, I'm going to choose to leave my pharmacy selected here as a local pharmacy. And at this point, we're going to move into step 4. Step 4 is determining how are we going to actually send this prescription from the system. Is it going to be sent electronically to the pharmacy, or are we going to print the prescription for the patient? You can select the print button, which will then ask you for your 4-digit PIN number and then allow you to see a print preview and then choose which printer you're going to send that to. The send button will do the same thing. It'll ask you for your 4-digit PIN number to confirm your user account and your access to the system. And then it's going to send it electronically to that CVS. Now, one thing I want to mention, as we've been going through these steps and we've been looking at all of the details of this prescription, one thing that is kind of a little bit different about this specific prescription is the color of the RX pad. You may notice from time to time that for the majority of the time, the RX pad will remain kind of a light blue-gray color. That means that the prescription is working just fine inside of the patient's chart. If the RX pad changes to yellow or red, that means we have some type of interaction going on with the patient's existing medications or with their problems. So anything on their diagnosis problem list. At this point, we're seeing that this medication has a severe interaction with the patient because the RX pad has changed to this red color. If at any point you want to know why the system is prompting you of this interaction, you can always click in the upper right-hand corner to view those interaction details. Now, at no point is the system going to keep you from sending those prescriptions out of the system. It will always still allow you to do so. The color change and the icon represented in the middle of the RX pad are just visual indicators to let you know that the system is identifying some type of interaction with this patient's prescription. Now, in this specific example, we're going to choose to send this electronically out of the system. So I'll select the send button. I'll then enter in my 4-digit PIN number and select OK. That's going to send that electronic script out of the system and over to CVS so that our patient can then go to the pharmacy and pick that electronic script up. Now you'll see once that sends out of the system, the prescription pad reverts back to that light blue color and allows us to set up potentially a new prescription for our patient. Now, one thing that I want to kind of focus on and switch gears and talk about is how to view your patient's full medication list. So like I've mentioned previously, you can always view your patient's current medications by navigating over to the patient AMP on the far right-hand side. This will give you details about all of the medications that are identified as current medications in the patient's medication list. Now, if we navigate to the very top of the screen into our toolbar, we'll select the History button to show us an even more detailed list of this patient's medication history. Now, one thing you'll notice at the very top of the list is this most recent prescription that we sent to CVS, that amoxicillin. So you'll get some additional details like the internal choice status. So the status of this prescription is current. If we choose to change this, for example, if we wanted to maybe mark it as discontinued or ineffective or allergic reaction, you can change any of these statuses. They do not do anything outside of the system. They will just kind of prioritize or change the way that they are listed in the medication list for better organization. You'll also notice that there are different icons displayed next to the medications. All of these blue computers represent that these medications have been sent as electronic prescriptions out of the system. One thing that you'll notice is in our e-status column, you're going to see a status update from our pharmacy. So the transaction was sent to the pharmacy, still waiting ultimate response. All of these have been sent to the pharmacy, and at this point, the patient has probably already picked them up. So anytime we see that transaction sent, that means we did our due diligence and we sent it out of the system correctly. So you're good to go. Now, on a few of these, or on one of these, you'll see this glucose, urine test glucose strips. These were actually marked as saved prescriptions, so they've been queued up. If you wanted to send them out of the system, you could always change the action column, or if you were wanting to copy this forward and maybe set up a new script, you can do that as well. Simply select the medication, navigate to the toolbar at the top of the screen, and select Copy. That'll bring all the details over from the medication history, and it will set it up as potentially a new script here on the RX pad. Now, one thing that I like to focus on when we talk about training our providers on medications is to talk about the favorites list. The favorites list is a great way to increase the speed of prescribing in the medication chart tab. So what you can do is, instead of taking the time to search for a drug that you're looking for every time, as you start to use the medication chart tab, add those frequently used medications to your favorites list so that it kind of becomes a much quicker process to find what you're looking for. So say, for example, we have this glucose urine test strips. We frequently prescribe this. We want to add this to our favorites list. What we can do is navigate to your sub toolbar at the top of the screen and select the drop-down next to the favorites icon. First and foremost, you'll want to create an actual list. So we'll give the list a name. So say, for example, I want to create a list name, maybe Dr. Smith's favorites. And then we're going to set that list as our default because that will be the list that we primarily use. And we'll hit Save. Now we've got a list. We can now add scripts to that list. So we're going to hit that drop down again and select Add to Favorite. That then brings up the drug name. We can then set any predetermined default dispense or sig fields. So if we want to say maybe the dispense for this is going to be 1 and it is an actual maybe box or something like that, we could set all of those details here and then choose which list it's going to go to. So we're going to put this on Dr. Smith's list and hit Save. Now, what's great about the favorites list is that they can all kind of work together. So a lot of practices choose to have a couple of providers work together to build out this master favorites list. And the great news is you can actually use other people's favorites lists. So if you're ever wanting to get some access into someone else's list, navigate to the upper right-hand corner of your search area and select the Other Favorites dropdown, And at any time, you can select someone else's lists here to open up that person's favorites list. That's going to complete our provider medication training on how to prescribe a new medication from the Choice platform. Thank you again for joining, and I look forward to having you on a future Choice EHR training.